Okay, we're here with Martyn Bridges from Worcester Bosch to talk about a load of things really, but like a general update about what's been going on. Martyn, how are you?
I'm very well, Joe, thank you. Yeah, during these troubled times, shall we say, that's probably the response you get from every question you ask of people during
Yeah.
the months of March and April.
Yeah,
But no, I'm well, thank you.
And you have to start every conversation with "How are you?" now, which is quite kind of nice in a way. We should carry on doing it in the future.
Yeah, oh, let's hope. Yeah, I've noticed that there is a politeness
Yeah.
About people at the moment. So I'm not saying they were impolite before, but they're going out of their way to say good morning or hello should you pass them, and yeah, it's rather nice.
And we're all generally interested as well. It's not throwaway. It's like, oh, generally want to know if you're okay and like if it's going well. So we'll kick off. We were just talking about this before we started recording, so we'll catch up on it. But Worcester have been helping out with manufacturing things to help in the fight against coronavirus. Could you touch on that, please?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've done a few things. Obviously, our two factories we have in the UK, one at Claycross in Derbyshire, which makes oil-fired boilers and floor-standing gas-fired boilers. And we have our Worcester plant, which is really just wall hung and the head office for all the functions. So both of those plants are significantly reduced in terms of capacity. Boilers are obviously not moving at the moment, so we offered our facilities, our expertise to BAYS when they put out a call for action, and we were part of a consortium to help build ventilators. So we don't know anything about ventilators, of course, but we're good at steel fabrication, so we've been making the steel casings and boxings for ventilators at our Claycross factory. I think we've done something like 550 of these so far. Yeah, it's good, and I don't know how many more are needed. You keep hearing stories that the initial requirement has now been met, and it's PPE which they're short of now. And to a lesser degree, we've helped out with that as well. We have these huge A1 printers at our head office, so we've been going in printing off patterns for a localised group of volunteers, some of which are Worcester employees as well, who are volunteering to sew and make, I think they call them scrubs for the frontline nurses and doctors. Yeah. And they make these clothes from these patterns, and they're washable, they're reusable, they're not the disposable types, they're made of fabric. And we've also donated some face protecting masks that we had, which we no longer obviously need whilst we're not making many boilers. So yeah, we've done as much as we can amongst much volunteering by the employees as well.
No, that's really good. It's interesting that the whole kind of industry comes together, because you hear a lot of these, like people volunteering, people on furlough that all of a sudden start volunteering for the NHS and all that sort of stuff, and it's really good that everyone's kind of coming together. But it seems especially high in the heating and plumbing industry. I'm not sure why.
No, I don't either. It's heartening to see that. It just proves what a wonderful industry it is, perhaps. It's full of good characters and goodwill is there. Yeah, I guess seeing that survey which you published a few days ago, that most of the heating companies are only working to 13% capacity at the moment. They've obviously got, time on their hands, some of the people have. And I think it's lovely that they've chosen to a certain point, put their lives on risk as well. Depends on what the volunteering level is, but yeah, anything which has been going on, I think it's indicative of this industry, how nice it can be sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on that survey. I find it really, really good to really delve into it. But and we know it's a difficult time for engineers because they're either at home not working, or they're working but they're doing very emergency stuff only, and they're taking all the precautions. What as a manufacturer are you doing to help the people on the front line?
Yeah, well, that is an issue. It's a concern. We still have service engineers at work. I speak to the other manufacturers on a weekly basis. We've all been keeping in touch with each other through our trade association. They're much the same. So we're doing emergency breakdown and repairs. Many, in fact most boilers out there now are on quite long warranties, and never before, perhaps not for the last few weeks you haven't needed heating so much, but never before have you needed hot water.
Yeah.
So the engineers are out there fulfilling warranty requirements and guarantee work for broken down boilers, etc. None of us, to my mind, to my knowledge, are doing any service work, even though the government description of essential maintenance and repairs is allowed. And I guess if you don't do the maintenance, it will end up as an essential repair to break down ultimately. But if we're called to a boiler to do something to it, it's very likely it will get serviced while we are there as well. So we have about half of our service team working. So we have like 150 engineers still at work, and the remainder are off because there isn't enough work. We're not doing any servicing work. And also some of the engineers, of course, are either vulnerable themselves or they have members of the family who are vulnerable. So there's quite a bit of that going on. And there is some fairly rigid instructions given out to the homeowner or householder when we go there. You know, we want to keep this 2 metre clearance, we're wiping down surfaces, we're wearing gloves and masks where it's appropriate, checking that nobody's been ill or is vulnerable in the house before we go. And at time of talking, I'm not aware of anybody exposing our engineers to any issues yet. So yeah, we're doing all we can safely. The behind the scenes team is still there, so the technical services team, which we have, well, you've seen it yourself actually, we have some 50 odd boys and girls generally answering technical inquiries, emails, internet inquiries, social media type of questions. Around half of those are still at work, albeit from home. And I guess that's one of the nice and interesting things which has come out of this. We found out how much we can actually do from home and avoid travel. You can't do it all, but you can do a huge chunk more than I ever thought was possible. So yeah, we have after-sales service engineers at work, going into people's properties, technical service engineers at home, answering inquiries, calls, etc. Doing a certain amount of what we temporarily called triaging as well. So where a homeowner or householder rings into the service department, believing they have a problem with their boiler, but it's in a grey area of it is perhaps intermittently not working, or it's making a noise or doing something odd, we're trying to avoid dispatching an engineer to something which isn't really an emergency. So we're transferring those calls through to our technical services department, who are talking the homeowner through it. And of course, the homeowners or householders, they're at home furloughed, a lot of them. So they're starting to do DIY things. They're starting to paint a bedroom and take a radiator off and then reconnect it themselves and wonder why their boiler isn't working. So we're getting a lot of educational calls where we're having to advise how to top the system up because you've removed a radiator and 3 gallons of water, and they've removed the room thermostat off the wall to paint behind it, and they've done something weird with the batteries or with the wires. And so yeah, we've got a lot of that going on, and it's good for our own team actually, because it's a different conversation talking to a homeowner or a householder rather than an engineer. You can go
a complete novice, yeah.
Yeah, you have to hold the hand a lot more, and it's in a way it's a sort of good bit of training, shall I say, for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting how we all kind of adapted. I think we've all adapted better than probably we would have thought we would have done if you would have said it like
yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, and I guess the other thing which has changed significantly is training. All of the manufacturers are really good at training. We do apparently between us something like 75% of all the installers in the country, all their training needs are generally done with a manufacturing partner that they favour, and boiler manufacturers particularly, but obviously all the others do their bit as well. And that's always face-to-face. That's generally a classroom-based, workshop-based activity. And of course, we can't have anybody into our premises, and they don't want to travel either. And you certainly would struggle to maintain 2 metre distancing when you're doing an ACS renewal or an Offtech renewal. So those are sort of on pause at the moment, but we're doing quite a lot of digital online training. And of course, it's purely theory and class-based. There is no boiler in the room they can dismantle or, fit a new part to. So it's taken a different direction to what we normally do, but again, one which we might maintain. These courses typically 2 hours, perhaps full up. That's about it. It makes you think, perhaps rather than an installer engineer having to give up 2 days or a day and a half this time on a course, as the years move onwards, we can perhaps do 2 or 3 hours of this online at home, and they would only then lose a day of their working time and money to attend one of our courses. So yeah, it's opened our eyes to what is possible. We've always had online training, but it's a one-way thing. There's never been really a communication. There's never been a two-way communication. But with these new forums, such as what we're on with Zoom as it is at the moment, you can genuinely have that feedback and questioning, etc., live as you speak.
Yeah, it's good. I completely agree. I think it's a thing that, a month ago you would have said, oh, Worcester are doing some online training. I'll be like, but all you'd want to do is touch the product. But that is the thing. We did some recently with some tools, and they were talking about all the tools, and we had a little demo of the tools, and all I want to do is touch the tools, and that's the only issue. And I think they always say installers it's an odd job because they're very traditional face-to-face people. They face-to-face go into a merchant, they physically pick up a product, then they go into someone's house face-to-face, and then they fit that product. So the digital side of it is starting to creep more and more in. And I think for things like training, like you said, if you can just top up with a couple of hours, especially if you've got a bit more time on your hands, makes complete sense.
Yeah, well, I watched 2 of yours in the last week or two. I saw the one on Thursday night, I think it was, about heating design and heat losses.
Yeah.
And of course, the one the week before, which was more of a personal view on things, which was with Tim. And I thought, yeah, both are really interesting, little short 30-minute, 40-minute type sessions. And yeah, it's once you see it and its popularity, we've always done a broadcast. We've always done a FaceTime, Facebook, YouTube type films we've played. But to have this response immediate from the engineers you're trying to inform them of a subject, that's the big difference to me. You can now actually do everything other than the practicalities of training.
Yeah. Talking of that, so we'll move on from the current situation, but trends, because we caught up in January, and kind of you guys give us a really good lay of the land in the upcoming 12 months. What sort of things would you be expecting when things do go back to normal for the heating and plumbing industry?
Well, it's decarbonisation is the hot potato at the moment. Presently, BEIS and MHCLG, the government departments who either write the building regulations to which much of these new targets are enshrined in, they have stated that they intend to stick to their present deadlines which were put out prior to the virus issue. I struggle to see how they will maintain that. Many of the people who input into standards and regulations, installers, engineers, technicians, manufacturers, trade associations, many of those are not at work. So they're not getting the input from some of the industry into the standards and regulations that they would like to have. So decarbonisation is the big thing. Behind that, there are some further regulations and standards and guidance going on. I guess one of the bigger ones is the benchmark initiative. So that's the intention to digitalise benchmark. It's been out for since 1999, I think it is. And it's the commissioning checklist and ongoing annual service schedule of boilers mostly, but it impacts cylinders as well, and heat pumps. And for years, that's just been a paper-based format, and you hopefully complete that at the end of the installation, and it stays with the boiler. But the plan is to bring that into the 21st century, have it online, have it digital. So there's an ongoing live record, shall we say, of what's going on with that heating system and that boiler. manufacturers can choose to look at that record and see if the service history has been kept up to date, and if that's part of the warranty requirements that the boiler is serviced annually, and it hasn't been, then they can choose whether they honour that warranty or not, I guess, is one of the benefits from it as well. But yeah, just the transparency of having the full service history of that boiler and heating system online. It'll take some years for it to become ingrained in the behavioural pattern and have a value. When a homeowner perhaps buys a house in the future, that may be one of the things that the estate agents or the solicitors ask for. Can you give me the full service history of the heating system and boiler? It might raise its prominence, rather like selling a car. You know, that you want the full service history, preferably from the dealer, but it can be from anywhere, just so you know that that car's in tip-top condition. And we'd like a heating system and boiler to have the same prominence, perhaps. So, a couple of things there. Building regs on decarbonisation. Part L is due out in this year, in October of 2020. Part L mainly affects new build properties, but it tends to drift downwards into existing properties as well in some form or another. RD SAP, for instance, is the inputs into that come from Part L and SAP. And the plan with Part L is to start us on this road to decarbonising brand new properties. The proposals on the table are a 20% or a 31% reduction in CO2. It looks like 31% will be the favoured one. And that was due to come into force in October of this year. It might still do that, it might do. But of course, builders still have prior approval for all their other houses. So it'll take some time to wash through into actuality. And there were some proposals about making builders not be able to build to regulations 10 years old, which some of them are still doing today. They've had a huge sites approved to, let's say, the 2013 regulations, and they're still building properties to that regulation. So there's going to be some cut-off, I believe, when that has to stop, and you now have to reapprove all these new projects to the latest regulations. About time too, as well, really.
Yeah, I mean, doing stuff that's with, you know, tech that's 10 years old wouldn't be ideal for anyone, would it?
And selling it at a price.
Yeah, a 2020
of 2020. Yes, you know, arguably it's not really spirit of the regulations. Weren't allowed to be almost in perpetuity. So yeah, there will probably be a window where it's, I don't know what it'll be, 1 year, 2 years. You've got to complete that site by then. Otherwise, you must reapprove to the latest requirements. So I think there's a lot of change which we're unused to and can't imagine, you know, 5 or 6 years ago happening. But I'm sure it will. I've seen some of the Scottish building regulation proposals for existing properties. So these are, you know, hundreds of years old, some of these properties could be, where they intend to start raising the bar on the efficiency of those houses. They intend using the energy performance certificate as the measurement and the EER rating part of that. And from a date, and it's not too far in the future, something like 2024, 2025, every property, when you came to sell it or rent it, must have an EPC rating of C. So that's far-reaching stuff which you never could have envisaged 5 or 6 years ago. It's still in its draft form, but I would imagine something similar will happen in England, Wales, Ireland, etc. if we need to decarbonise properties by 2050.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it before, but one of the hot topics in the industry, and it is hydrogen, and it gets a huge amount of interest whenever we do any stories which we spoke about before. And I think it's like what you said, because it involves so many different people, manufacturers, installers, but also upper tiers. And I know that Worcester are one of the leaders, the thought leaders in the process. So have you got an update about hydrogen heating, hydrogen boilers and all that sort of stuff for us?
Very much, yeah. We recognised 4 or 5 years ago, I think, as Penny did, that hang on, there are some 17 million homes in the UK with a combi boiler fitted. So no hot water cylinder and no likely space for one. So how on earth can you remove that very compact, concise heating system and replace it with a heat pump, which will require a hot water storage cylinder? That's going to be very intrusive. May probably mean you stealing a bit of a bedroom or a landing or something from an existing house. So the better alternative we felt was to change to a carbon-free gas. And hydrogen, there are two ways, or probably more now, but the two main ways of generating hydrogen are either from the steam reformation of natural gas and capturing the carbon at the point of manufacture and burying it literally, or from electrolysis, from perhaps on or offshore wind driving an electrolyzer and then creating hydrogen that way. That's pretty green that way. The other way, not so green, but it would be at the point of use, at the point in somebody's property. So we started testing and working on boilers and found, I think we fired our first hydrogen prototype in 2017. Yeah, it's going back a year or two, and we've learned quite a lot since then. And then we started working on a hydrogen-ready boiler. So we were looking at it as just a replacement boiler. Take a natural gas boiler out, put a hydrogen one in its place. But then it was quite understandably pointed out, well, hang on, if you do that to a city, and Leeds was a city which was being talked about. So if you change 57,000 boilers in the city of Leeds and do that perhaps in a year, then everybody's got a brand new boiler and all the heating engineers would not have too much work over the next 13 or 14 years, other than the odd service or two. So you would mess up the economy as well as mess up some sort of micro industries as well as merchants and distribution and disrupt people's properties. So BEIS encouraged us to develop a hydrogen-ready boiler, which is what we've managed to do. So this boiler is 95% the same as a current natural gas boiler, apart from the combustion area. And with our boiler and with one or two of the other manufacturers who are also participating, Baxi in also in the BEIS scheme, we've both developed boilers which will run on natural gas up until the point that hydrogen becomes available in that town, city, village, and with, in our case, 2 or 3 components can be exchanged, and that boiler is now hydrogen ready. Or rather, it will work on hydrogen. It's hydrogen ready in the first place, running on natural gas and then converted to 100% hydrogen. So in that way, you wouldn't mess up the economy. And if the government chose to, they could put in place a date where only hydrogen ready boilers could be sold. And that this is something they are exploring and talking about. And the date is not firmed up or even the intention to do it, but it could be anywhere between, let's say, 2025 and 2030, where they might say, right, from this day on, you can only sell or place onto the market in the UK boilers that can be converted to hydrogen as and when hydrogen becomes available. Because that boiler would have been replaced anyhow. You know, the running rate for boilers in the UK is 1.6, 1.7 million a year. They're not replaced because somebody feels like doing it. They're replaced because their existing boiler has had it. It's either beyond repair, or they're perhaps renovating the house, or, you know, if the parts are not available or whatever. So generally, the 1.6 million a year, let's say, is the sort of norm. So if we were to say, right, from, I don't know, guess a figure, 2025, it's hydrogen-only boilers allowed. After 10 years, we'd have populated 16 million homes with hydrogen-ready boilers. Wow. And there's only, well, I say only, it's huge. There's 23 million, 24 million homes connected to the gas grid at the moment. So without any investment from the government and the boilers will only cost perhaps 100 quid more than a current natural gas boiler. You know, it's not a great amount in the big scheme of things. They have got the population of the UK to almost get themselves halfway ready to a hydrogen economy. And the other bonus and benefit of hydrogen is we're in the middle of this pipework replacement programme. So the natural gas infrastructure in the UK is tremendous. There's 136,000 miles of gas pipework under the ground, zigzagging all over the place. And a programme was decided upon many years ago to replace all the steel and cast iron pipework with the yellow polyethylene type pipe, which can transport hydrogen. So the government have got two lucky things there. They've got people perhaps populating boilers with hydrogen-ready boilers at their own expense, and they've got this pipework replacement programme going on. So they have the way of transporting gas to the home readily convert it more or less for hydrogen as well. They've now just got to generate hydrogen, I say just, generate hydrogen at the start through one form or another. So it all seems rather easier than electrifying every property. I know there's room for both here. I know heat pumps are a fine technology, particularly in, you know, a new property where you haven't inherited an existing heating system which was originally sized for a boiler, and you haven't had to put remedial works in place for new insulation, windows and stuff like that. So in a brand new property or an extreme renovation, they're really good technology. We sell them, we have been since 2006. A lot of people tend to refer to us as boiler manufacturers, but we do sell everything. And in fact, we were the first ones, I think, in the UK to advertise heat pumps on the television back in the mid-2000s. So everything has a place, but I see heat pumps really being very suitable for new build, extreme renovations, perhaps as a hybrid to support an existing boiler. But I see the majority of homes in the UK more likely to be suited to a hydrogen replacement boiler.
Yeah, it's very interesting, you know, how everything can go, and how it's definitely going to take a mix of technologies no matter what happens.
Yeah, and as you've already mentioned, the interest in hydrogen is not just from installers and environmentalists. You know, I'm getting inquiries from all over the world, literally, about they've read an article, very likely in your publication or online, about the potential for hydrogen. So it is something which is rippling around the world, particularly parts of Europe, though. There is, you know, a need for the world to decarbonise rather than just the UK. Or we all have different speeds in trying to get there, but Europe for sure, they have much the same issue as us. Many of their properties are sort of older, not perhaps quite as bad as us, but certain bits of it do, like the Netherlands. They have quite old properties as well. So to renovate, insulate, and put a heat pump in where a comb has always been, is a struggle for them as well. So they see hydrogen as a big movement.
And if we concentrate on the here and now, have Worcester got any products that are coming out at the end of this year or this year, at any point this year, that installers can get excited about?
Yeah, we had some great plans, and we're unsure whether, you know, when we get back to work, whether the installing fraternity will just be more interested in catching up, getting back to their own capacity levels, rather than taking on board new products, etc. So, yeah, we're still taking a decision on whether we should launch replacement boilers for any of our existing ones until we see the situation. If you think of it now, we're talking today, it's the 27th of April. It looks like we're furloughed, or we're locked down rather, for another 2 weeks, I think it is. And any return is probably going to be staggered and staged. It's unlikely that this industry will be anywhere near full speed until probably, I'm guessing, September, October, something like that. That's not a great time to launch products anyhow, because the market for boiler installations virtually doubles in October and November compared to May, June, July, etc. So yeah, we're still sitting on the fence as to whether we should press the button. I suspect it's likely we will be holding back product launches really until we're all back to work fully and got over our backlog of orders, etc. We have some controls we launched only a week or so ago, so they were already in the pipeline, and it was easier to let them still get launched than not. But yeah, we're always trying to keep things fresh and upbeat and modern. And I think that latest launch of last year, the 8000 boiler, showed that sort of way the market wants to sort of go, with a sort of slick, modern design looking boiler. And it would be no surprise that we would like to replace all of our range of previous looking boilers, the white case boilers, with that type of aesthetic. But yeah, we're on pause, shall we say, till the industry's up and running at full speed.